facility for the Marathon Oil
look
Company.
at that. What, 1, 2, 3, 4,
That's over there. This is all new. They
5,
at one time they only had
6,
2
7.
of these storage tanks. Now this place is expanding and there's more and more all the time. And the residents, of course, are concerned about security. You can see right now that, I think that there's not enough security. There was a police car parked down the road, but besides that, there really isn't too much security. They do have a little fence here that you could easily drive a vehicle through or jump over.
That is awful.
So that's what's going on here. This is in a very urban community.
Yeah, there's been nice little houses all along.
Yeah, there's a lot of lower income homes in this area. Between Niles and South Bend and the 131 Major Road is not too far away.
So it's Mobile and Marathon. I didn't know those were connected.
Well, I think it all is.
Yeah.
But this is
something.
And the residents of Niles have been fighting a big gas facility. They want to have a natural gas heating here, and the residents are unsure about that too. And not only are they unsure about that, but this area is being built way up. So there's a lot of storage of this these gas and oil products here.
Amazing. So far, nobody's come out to ask us why we're taking pictures.
No, I don't think so. They're not too concerned.
Yeah.
There's a pretty truck with a flag on it.
Yeah, right.
Patriotic. How pretty.
You paint a flag and that's okay.
It is pretty, but what if there was terrorism here? How would it affect the community?
Yeah, it sure
it's just
is.
one of many places that I think just one of many places here in our country that's probably vulnerable to attack.
Yeah. And it's on a main road.
Yeah, it would hurt a lot of people.
Yeah. There's no way they can make this secure. No way.
I don't think so. Plus the residual effects of burning gases, what it would do to air quality. That's a biggie.
Yeah. Major thing. Yeah. 1203 must be the number for flammable gas. Yeah, that's
Follow me?
Yeah. Now that section under the canopy of the Palmer House is their private sidewalk, and we were not allowed to pass out papers on the sidewalk. How can a city, Chicago or any other, sell public domain, the public sidewalk? Well, we got a Western on TV.
A really good synopsis comparison between BWRs and PWRs, and there's some very great diagrams that you somehow snarfed out of the NRC before they closed their website. But one of the significant differences is looking at the different reactors, where you have, in the case of the boiling water reactors, and in Illinois we have 7 of those. If you look at the map behind Kevin here, the 2 all the way to your left are Quad Cities. You've got Clinton down at the bottom. Then up in that lump in the center there, you have 2 at LaSalle and 3 at Dresden. Those are all boiling water reactors, and according to the schematics of what Dave has in his piece, the spent fuel pool is above the level of the ground in BWRs, whereas at the pressurized water reactors, they're actually at ground level. The significance of that being that you can empty a BWR pool much more easily, I would say, than a PWR pool in terms of breaking pipes or suspending water flow. The water is going to seek a level, and you can't drive water underground per se, but if you got it 2 stories up in the air, it's definitely going to go out. So these are some of the other considerations I think that would have to be weighed, is the unique differences reactor to reactor.
Excuse me, are you saying that
PWR system.
Big
Because
Rock
it's hot.
Point is one of those.
what?
Big Rock Point is one of those. A great big blue ball, which is 3/4 inch boilerplate,
Yeah.
not containment. And 2 stories up, be cool. I don't know in the 3.5 years that they started decommissioning whether they have been able to take the contents out of that pool and disassemble it or not.
Well, it's easier to shoot it, do anything. I mean, you can make, if it's up in the air, right? A plane could go through it. Easy, I mean, what?
Hold on just a second.
Yeah,
I was
I
just
was-
curious, are there other folks who want to jump in on any of these topics or issues, or do you have questions, specific ones that you want to get out before we decide to adjourn tonight? I see you're leaving already.
Stuff at home, but I signed, so I hope that I'll, and through Bob and so forth, I hope that I'll hear about upcoming events. Very educational.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How often do you do this sort of thing?
Once every December 10th or so.
So-
Whenever the nuclear industry has a conference, we got to keep up with them.
He's speaking at 2 college and complexes events.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I'll see you there. Otherwise, I do hope to hear.
Yeah,
All right.
yes. Onward.
Kevin, I was wondering, you're saying like there's thousands of people in Germany that how do they mobilize that many people? How could we apply that to here so we get more people?
Yeah, good
Good
question.
question.
Yeah.
What's
very-
the difference? I mean,
Well-
there's obviously some difference between there and here. Is it more
Yeah.
population density in a small area? Is that it? Or?
There's a lot of factors, but to let you know, it was funny to go over there because we talked to some of the folks who've been longtime organizers in Germany, and the resistance in Gorleben goes back 25 years till 1977. The German government wanted to build a reactor complex, a reprocessing facility, and a waste dump in Gorleben. It was going to be a lot of the whole nuclear fuel cycle there, and the resistance began in the late 70s. And at this point, the reactor complex is dead for a long time now, and the reprocessing center is dead. Never happened. The only thing still to fight is the dump. Way back in the late 70s, there was a protest I learned about in Hanover, Germany, which is in that region, roughly. And it was a pretty good turnout, in the tens of thousands of people were taking part. And it just so happened to coincide right in the middle of this event with the 3 Mile Island accident. And the next day they had 300,000 people in Hanover.
Oh my
And
gosh,
that kicked off the
whole thing.
resistance in that region. And so 3 Mile Island had a lot to do with it. And at the same time, some of those organizers in Gorleben who've been at it for, decades, they said that that they came to the United States and met the Clamshell Alliance people in New Hampshire and learned a lot from Clamshell and took it back to Germany. So they actually got their inspiration and their model for organizing here in the US. And when I got back from my trip, just a couple weeks ago, I talked to my coworker, Paul Gunter, who's from New Hampshire, and said, Paul, they said they got inspired by your work, and now look at what it's doing in Germany. And Paul said, wow, that's really funny because when we started with the Clamshell Alliance, we sent some people to Germany and learned about their resistance at a nuclear complex called Wheel, which I don't know about that history, but there's been some going back and forth. I don't know, there's no easy answers. I think one of the ideas that they use in Germany is they do campus tours a lot. And they've got organizers. College campus. They're organizers who, a year ahead of these protests, are touring the whole country, speaking at college campuses, trying to beat the drum, trying to get people excited.
Oh, no kidding.
And that kind of approach was used for Seattle, for the big demo there. Public Citizen and other organizers were a year out before the event, were talking it up at conferences, at student environmental conferences, traveling around to campuses. So there's no easy answers. It's a lot of work. That's the easy answer. Is it's going to take a huge amount of work to create here what they have in Germany. And they don't. It's not perfect in Germany either. I mean, even in the county where they're at, there's a lot of resistance to the dump, but it's not everybody. There's still people who are scared to take part. There's not a whole lot of people who are in favor of the dump. Some are, because there's money being offered. Just like if Nevada were to roll over, they might get some compensation, but it's a small number of people who feel that way.
Item that the delivery had been made to Gorleben.
It did get through, but the good news is for the resistance, there were 15,000 police deployed for like 2-3 weeks. They were deployed in this county, and in the end, it cost the German government $25 million to move 6 containers of waste.
Wow.
This time. In '97, there were 6 containers of waste. There were 20,000 protesters, and there were 30,000 police. So twice as many police, because there were twice as many protesters. That shipment of 6 containers cost $100 million to move into Gorleben. And so we're talking a handful of containers. At this point, there's 14 containers that have been moved into this warehouse temporary holding facility at Gorleben. That's less than our Palisades. There's more than that at Palisades on the beach.
Yeah.
And it's cost the German government hundreds of millions of dollars to move those 14 containers into the Gorleben. So they've driven the cost through the roof. And that's the success. Yeah, they are getting a trickle of containers in there, but they can't continue this. It's costing way too much money.
And that is not a nuclear industry expense.
It's a German taxpayer expense.
I think I recall some of our against these nuclear casks and nuclear development, then there wouldn't be the need to have taxpayers pay for all these policemen when you show up for demonstrations. And
Gee.
can you believe that we actually swallow that? I can't really think that that's part of the American Revolution spirit.
You could always ask them how many incident. How much would that cost to clean that up? You know, nuclear waste spill costs a lot more than that.
Did anyone get into the conference? We often do that at these programs, get somebody inside the conference.
We're not allowed.
In the media.
They would have arrested us.
Well, some people get in as members of the media. Does anybody know who might have attended it? Anybody from the media?
We talked with 3 journalists, one of whom we have known for a decade, and he will share information.
In the future?
As soon as the conference is on.
How many days?
What?
How many days?
It ends tomorrow.
I went to an industry conference that took place in Chicago in early September. It was called the Packaging and Transportation of Radioactive Materials, and it's once every 3 years, and it was 630 representatives of government regulatory agencies and the nuclear power industry. And I think there were like 20 different countries represented at this conference. And they invited me as like the token anti-nuclear activist to sit on a panel on Monday. And the conference went for 5 days.
Ooh.
And I don't think they expected me to stay for 5 days, but I did. And went to a lot of very interesting workshops. And one that was the most fun was called Public Acceptance, I believe they called it. Public Acceptance of Radioactive Transportation. And they showed some slideshows of how to counter activism against radioactive transport. So Citizens Awareness Network, which is a New England coalition of anti-nuclear groups, was featured during one slideshow. And it was all about them, and it was pictures of them and their actions, and some of us have been at their action camps up there. So it was good to hear all that. And I think one of the big lessons I took out of that conference, it was right in the literature of the conference that said, if nuclear transportation stops, then the whole enterprise grinds to a screeching halt. That was almost verbatim what they said at the conference. And I think that's the brilliance of the German movement, is that they've latched onto that. They're really focusing in on that. And we need to do that here. Nevada, that's why they chose Nevada and Utah as potential dump sites, because these are politically weak states compared to the other states, and they think that if they can isolate those states, that they can get away with it. And we have to wake up states like Illinois that have 35,000 waste shipments that would come through here. Wake them up to the fact that this affects them, and they need to take a stand.
You have to really connect. Numbers who are active with them. They're concentrating on corporatocracy, corporate power, pretty much molded from the Nader campaign. But I think this is an issue that a number of them can get their teeth into.
Yeah.
Somebody has to.
And there's another lesson from Germany that involves the Greens too. One of the folks we brought over to our action camp here last summer is one of the main organizers in Gorleben, and he spoke right to the point. The German Green Party struck a deal with Schroeder's party and with the nuclear industry, a supposed phase out of nuclear power over the next 30 years. And really what the official Green Party asked was that people stop protesting these shipments into Gorleben. And it created a huge rift in the Green Party. The Green Party of that region has totally not accepted that at all, and turned out in the hundreds and thousands to protest the last two shipments after the deal was struck. And Greens from around the country too. A lot of the grassroots activist members just won't go through that. So
Yeah, the war's split them even
Yeah.
further.
yeah.
We're going through splits here. We've got two main parties.
So they're actually split now in Germany, the Greens?
There's a lot of disagreement about the policies of the official high-level Green leaders who are voting in favor of military activities and voting in favor of these waste shipments into Gorleben. And then the grassroots base are very upset about it.
I'm just safe, because after 20 years, the helium runs out. It has to have the helium circulate in the cask. Okay? And after 20 years, you have to renew the helium, and you have to take out the spent fuel pools. They were sort of in a basket thing. And they don't know how to take those pools out of the cask, and they never have.
That to the best of our knowledge, unless somebody knows different, I
There's
think
been accidents
they've not
on it.
yet unloaded a dry cask in this country.
And after 20 years, it has to happen. So we're talking 20 years, that's not very long.
I'm not sure that it might have to happen if they're theoretically airtight. And if they are airtight and they stay airtight, I don't think the helium would have to be renewed, because it would still be in there. And the reason they put helium in this inner canister is so that the fuel rods don't react with air, with oxygen, and oxidize and corrode and deteriorate. The problem is that some of the dry casks have had seal failures, and I don't think it's true yet that helium has escaped from a canister, but it's coming pretty close. There's multiple lids on these inner canisters, and if there's 3 lids, I think in some cases at least 1, if not 2, have failed, like at the Surrey nuclear plant in Virginia. So yeah, the helium is getting closer to making its way out.
You mean the lids aren't shut properly, or what are you
The
saying?
seals are not airtight, they're failing.
Oh, so they're not going to last forever,
Yeah.
like anything else.
Yeah. Well, the radiation and the heat has its wear and tear effect on these materials. Yeah.
helium is not all that easy to contain anyway, because the atom is so tiny, it tends to find every possible escape route over time.
It's really tiny, yeah?
Really tight.
You're about.
Yeah, it seems pretty obvious that we're going fairly far down a road that is fraught with real hazards and pitfalls. And as a society, at some point, we have to start looking at the possibility that no matter how much engineering prowess and investment, research we put into solving some of these problems, that some of them may be so fundamental and have so much to do at the most basic level with the physics of the materials involved, that they might actually be insoluble and not ever yield to our wit and cleverness. And for that reason, as a culture, we have got to look about the timing of a decision to abort the whole thing collectively, and bring the operation of the reactors to a stop. And the good
That's what
news,
we have to do.
the good news about bringing the reactors to a stop is that, for example, in the U.S., we're only getting just about, almost, not quite, 1 part in 5 of all the electricity driving the whole show. It's a tiny, not tiny, it's a small minority contributor in the country. But then, in contrast to the fact that we don't really rely on nuclear power, is the fact that a place like the Chicago metro area, smack in the middle of the Commonwealth Edison service territory, is very seriously dependent upon nuclear power. And rather than to say really that it's depending upon nuclear power, I'd like to think of it as that we are essentially a hostage to the nuclear industry.
That's for sure.
And this is developed over a period of time where the major power company took a real pure interest in diving in head first and going all nuclear all the time, and that's what we have now. So the leadership to get us out of this mess as a country, I think, has got to come from a place like this, where we have to bite the bullet the hardest and make the biggest transformation from being 80%, I think the number right now, 77% nuclear here. The small amount of power buzzing around us right now is something that isn't making nuclear waste. The small part, the little part, that's 1/5. All the rest of us making nuclear waste. These things here shown in that pyramid about energy efficiency, renewables, other sources, and new capacity, that they are not looking at. I have to tell you, they are not aggressively looking at that in the Chicago area, and that, I think, is a barometer of the fact that the people at the helm of energy policy are saying, let's just keep on going down this road and we will figure it out. We'll get an answer. We're working on it. We'll get back to you. And in my heart, I think we could find ourselves 15, 20 years further down the line, and we will simply have had maybe a nuclear accident under our belt or two. And unless we get a message from the helm to put the brakes on. So the question I would ask people is, what does it take for us and our big economic partners in Europe to agree suddenly that this is a horrible mistake, and let's reverse the funding priorities?
Did you want to respond?
Yes.
Problems in the 1970s, right? Prior to 3 Mile Island and economics and various other reasons, there was almost a Wall Street moratorium on nuclear power plants, right? And then the 3 Mile Island accident sealed it. And so there hasn't been a nuclear power plant built since the 70s, right? And that was the early 70s. So that's 30 years ago. And, you know, they talk about the 3 Mile Island, well, that's what galvanized, you said, the movement in Germany. And one of the things about the 3 Mile Island plant, or the accident, is if there had to be an accident any place, they could have picked a more benign spot for it. Or because, in other words, this reactor had hardly run at all. And the amount of radioactivity, right, that it had to release was very slight compared to the kind of amount of radioactivity that a plant, say, in Zion would have released. I mean, that accident had been in Zion compared to 3 Mile Island would have been a completely different story. And I think that that impact, if that accident had been in here, would have been a lot far more lasting than the accident at 3 Mile Island. Now, you know, quite a bit of time has passed, and there's been a tremendous effort to whitewash whatever effects there were from 3 Mile Island, you know. And so probably nothing would stop the thing completely unless there was an accident or if there was some kind of terrorist attack. I mean, that's
But it should be,
probably
it should be evident from the terrorist attack on September 11th. I mean, you know, so I don't know if that can make
I
a
think they were
difference.
definitely scared, and they still are. I heard on the NPR,
Yeah.
the International Atomic Energy Conference or something, they were studying the terrorism, and the spokesman for that on NPR said no way could they stop at any nuclear reactor in the United States, a dedicated group of terrorists who would sacrifice their lives